Abandoned gorilla finally gets a friend. Their first hug leaves the entire zoo in tears. The air in the primate wing usually smelled of damp earth and sweet fruit, but that morning it smelled like an unbearable loneliness. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day Emily Donovan preferred, with the gray sky hanging low over the city and the rhythmic, hypnotic drumming of rain against the skylights of the Regenstein Center, creating a drowsy, heavy atmosphere. Inside, the chaotic symphony of the zoo had fallen into a somber, haunting hum. Kobe, the sanctuary's most isolated resident, wasn't eating his bamboo or engaging with his enrichment puzzles. He was sitting perfectly still in the far corner of his enclosure, his massive, pot-bellied frame slumped against the cold stone, his dark, soulful eyes fixed on the empty space beside him with a devastating expression of helplessness. Kobe had been abandoned by his troop years ago, a soulful, gentle patriarch who had been left with no family to lead and no heart to call his own. But today, the atmosphere shifted in a way that made the hair on Emily's arms stand up. After months of searching for a companion, the zoo had finally found a match, a younger, equally lonely gorilla named Tatu. When they finally met, their first hug didn't just break the years of silence, it left the entire staff in a state of shock, clutching their radios with trembling hands as tears blurred their vision. What happens when two souls, broken by abandonment and the cold weight of isolation, finally find a reason to hope? We expected a tense, territorial standoff when these two massive silverbacks met for the first time today. Instead, we witnessed a moment of pure, interspecies empathy that challenges everything we know about animal social structures and the capacity for love in nature's most misunderstood giants. After years of solitary confinement, Kobe finally got a friend, and their first hug left the entire zoo in tears. Before we dive into this incredible, heart-wrenching story of friendship and survival, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep sharing these powerful stories of the unbreakable bonds of the animal kingdom. Ring that bell so you never miss an update. Emily had been a lead zookeeper for nearly 5 years, and she had seen just about everything. She knew the distinct personalities of every ape in her care better than she knew some of her own cousins. She knew that Kobe was a gentle giant with a jagged scar on his left palm from a childhood injury, a mark that Emily often thought of as a shared secret between them, a symbol of resilience that only she was allowed to touch during medical checks. Kobe's isolation wasn't just physical, it was a profound cognitive withdrawal. He had stopped playing, stopped grooming, and his gaze was often distant and glassy, as if he were mourning a life he could no longer remember. The air in the enclosure felt charged with a palpable tension as the time for the introduction approached. It started with a sound, a low, rhythmic, and incredibly soft grunting noise that Emily recognized as a peace call. Tatu, the newcomer, was being held in the adjacent shifting chute, separated only by a heavy steel mesh door. Tatu was smaller than Kobe, with a bundle of chaotic hair and wide, whisker-fringed eyes that mirrored Kobe's own history of loss. As the motor of the heavy door began to hum, sliding open with a slow, deliberate scrape, the silence in the observation room was so thick it felt like a physical weight. Emily stood at the glass, her knuckles white as she gripped the metal railing. James, the head keeper, was positioned by the safety release. Emily whispered into her radio, her voice steady but tight, telling him to keep the high-pressure hoses ready, just in case of a territorial dispute. Kobe was moving toward the gate now, his respiration through the roof. James responded from the observation deck, confirming that Tatu was holding his ground and showing no signs of outward aggression, though his nervous energy was undeniable. Kobe approached the opening with a pace that felt heavier than a run. He didn't roar. He didn't beat his chest. Instead, He stopped just inches from the threshold, his long whiskers twitching as he caught the scent of another gorilla for the first time in 3 long, silent years. Something didn't sit right in Emily's gut as she watched the monitors, not because of fear, but because of the sheer emotional gravity of the moment. That primal instinct, the one that every good zookeeper develops, told her they were witnessing a biological revelation. Suddenly, Tatu did something that bypassed all the rules of primate hierarchy. He reached out. It wasn't a swipe or a grab. He extended his hand, palm up, in a posture of utter vulnerability, revealing his own soft, leathery palm. Kobe froze. His wide, liquid brown eyes darted from Tatu's hand to his face. For a minute, no one in the room breathed. Then, Kobe did something that destroyed everyone watching. He stepped forward and wrapped his massive, shaggy arms around Tatu, pulling the smaller gorilla into a deep, crushing, and desperate embrace. But a minute into the hug, the joy turned into a terrifying medical crisis. Kobe's body suddenly went limp, his massive weight collapsing onto the younger, smaller gorilla. Tatu didn't panic. He tried to hold Kobe up, his small hands clutching the silverback's fur. Emily screamed into her radio for the medical team to enter immediately. The emotional shock of the connection, the surge of adrenaline after years of stasis, had triggered a latent condition. The controlled chaos that followed was a blur of boots on concrete and the frantic clanking of medical equipment. The team had to move the 2 massive animals apart, and as they pulled Kobe away, Tatu let out a high-pitched, mourning whimper that echoed through the entire wing. The clinic, usually quiet on a rainy Tuesday, became a hive of activity. Monitors beeped frantically as Kobe was placed on the cold, stainless steel exam table. Dr. Williams, the lead vet, rushed in, his face grim. He announced that Kobe was in atrial fibrillation. His heart wasn't pumping effectively, just quivering in his chest. The surge of adrenaline from the meeting had been too much for his weakened cardiovascular system. They needed to stabilize him immediately, or the friendship would end before it had even begun. Emily stood by Kobe's head, her fingers brushing the coarse hair of his brow, whispering to him, while Dr. Williams worked with clinical precision. She watched the cardiac monitor with a sinking heart. The green line was a mess, jagged, irregular peaks and valleys that made no sense. Dr. Williams barked for the intubation kit, stating that blood was pooling in the lungs because the heart couldn't keep up. They ran a quick ultrasound, and the diagnosis hung in the air like a sentence: dilated cardiomyopathy. Kobe had been living with a weakened heart for years, a condition hidden by his sedentary, lonely lifestyle. The first hug had pushed him to the absolute brink. Emily asked if they could save him, her voice cracking as tears blurred her vision. Dr. Williams looked at Kobe's hand, which was still twitching as if looking for Tatu's palm. He ordered the lidocaine and digoxin, determined to fight for every heartbeat. The next hour was a grueling battle. There were moments where the monitor wailed a steady, flat tone, and the room went deathly silent until the beat returned with a weak, stuttering thud. Emily held Kobe's hand the entire time, her thumb rubbing over the familiar scar on his palm, the same spot where he had first felt the touch of a friend. She realized then that the hug hadn't just been a greeting, it had been a total surrender of his isolation. Kobe had held on to his strength until he knew he wasn't alone anymore, and then his body had finally let go of the years of accumulated stress. Finally, the rhythm on the monitor began to smooth out into a steady, albeit fragile, pace. Dr. Williams exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead, noting that the medication was holding and that Kobe was a true fighter. The recovery was a roller coaster of emotions and technical challenges. Kobe had to stay in the medical unit for 2 weeks, and during that entire time, Tatu refused to leave the mesh door of the shifting chute. He sat there day and night, ignoring his favorite fruits, letting out soft, calling sounds whenever he heard a noise from the clinic. Emily had to get creative to keep Kobe's spirits up, hiding his heart medications in mashed bananas and tiny spoonfuls of chilled yogurt. She spent her evenings sitting between the two areas, reading books aloud to keep them both calm, acting as the bridge between their separated worlds. She was keeping her silent promise that neither of them would have to face the dark alone again. The weeks stretched on, marked by the rhythmic dripping of the late winter rain. Kobe's strength returned in increments. First, it was the way he sat up to greet Emily in the mornings. Then, it was the return of his appetite, the way he would delicately peel a grape with his massive, leathery fingers. Throughout the process, the bond between the human staff and the great ape deepened. They weren't just observing a patient, they were helping a friend return to a life he had forgotten how to live. Dr. Williams monitored Kobe's heart with every feeding, the stethoscope pressed against the thick, dark fur of his chest, listening for any sign of the arrhythmia returning. One rainy Tuesday, exactly a month after the incident, it was finally time for the permanent reintroduction. The zoo was closed for the evening, and the rhythmic drumming of rain on the skylights felt like a comforting, triumphant song. Emily opened the gate with a shaking hand. Kobe walked out, slower and more deliberate than before, but his soulful eyes were bright and full of life. Tatu didn't wait for a signal. He ran to Kobe and tucked his head under the silverback's chin, a gesture of total submission and love. Kobe raised his hand and pressed his scarred palm against the glass where Emily was standing. It was a thank you. It was a bond forged in the fire of a crisis, a silent acknowledgement that they were all part of the same troop now. The rest of the troop watched from the higher platforms, their grunts of approval echoing through the enclosure. For the first time in years, Kobe wasn't just a silverback in name, he was a leader again. He groomed Tatu with a tenderness that moved the veteran keepers to silence. The younger gorilla followed Kobe everywhere, a constant shadow that ensured the elder silverback was never truly alone. The palpable tension that had once defined the enclosure had been replaced by a peaceful, chaotic harmony. Emily realized then that she hadn't just saved an animal, she had witnessed the cognitive and emotional depth of a creature who had nearly died from the sheer intensity of finally being loved. As the rain began to fall harder outside, blurring the world into shades of green and shadow, Emily watched the two gorillas nestling together in the straw. The desolate refuge was now a home filled with the chaotic symphony of life. Kobe was no longer the abandoned gorilla. He was a brother, a mentor, and a survivor. And as Emily walked back to the keeper quarters in the fading light, she felt a sense of purpose that no paycheck could ever provide, knowing that the empty space in Kobe's heart was finally, beautifully full. The story of Kobe and Tatu became a legend within the zoo community, a case study in the power of social connection for primate health. But for Emily, it was simpler than that. It was about the moment the glass seemed to disappear, the moment when a scarred palm and a human hand shared the same heat and the same hope. As she hung up her keys for the night, she looked back at the darkening primate house. The rain was still falling, but inside, the silence had been conquered. If you enjoyed this emotional journey of friendship and the incredible bond between these two survivors, please don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps us share these stories of animal empathy and the miracles of nature with the world. And if you want to see more heartwarming rescues, medical dramas, and animal reunions, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video as we continue to explore the unbreakable bonds of the animal kingdom. Would you like me to create a video title and description for this story?